Hello everyone, we are now going to go over the bone marrow flow cytometry from a 52-year-old man who presented with pancytopenia. So let's start with CD45 versus site scatter. And we have a population here that expresses bright CD45 and has low site scatter, and those are our lymphocytes. And the population that is kind of sitting just above the lymphocytes or the monocytes. Here it looks like it's kind of, merging with the lymphocytes, but that's because this is an intensity plot. However, those are like a different population. And our granulocytes, which have high site scatter and dimmer CD45 than lymphocytes and monocytes are here. And we see a large population. The gate says that it is 36% of all cells that are evaluated. They have dimmer CD45 and slightly higher site scatter. So traditionally, the blast gate is used to sit here, right? Like just below the granulocytes. They have dimmer CD45 and low site scatter. This population has even dimmer CD45 than we usually expect for the blast. Let's follow this and see what happens to these cells. So in CD33 versus CD34, they are negative for both 34 and 33. They're negative for CD11B. So remember that the gated cells of these cells, which are in this gate, they kind of are merging with this cells in this gate. So there might be some contamination with granulocytes in our gated cells. So that's very helpful in an intensity plot to see where majority of the population are. So these could be just granulocytes that are, creeping into this gate. Let's keep that in mind and see if rest of the phenotype matches that as well. And the gated cells express partial CD13. Again, in CD16, we see that population which we thought was granulocytes. So yeah, granulocytes express CD16, especially in the mature stage or mature neutrophil stage. So this matches. And here again, it shows that they're negative for CD33. And we see that they are negative for the B cell marker CD19. They're negative for CD10 and CD7. CD7 is usually positive on T lymphoblasts. We see that being completely negative here. And again, the granulocytes express CD10. So yeah, this is another confirmation. They express a dim CD64, the gated cells. They're negative for CD2. They're negative for CD14. They express a partial CD4 and a partial HLA-DR. And they are homogeneously positive for CD117, negative for CD38, and they're negative for CD15. Again, here it shows that they're positive for 117. So far we have a population that expresses very dim CD45, and actually it kind of, the population extends to the region where CD45 is negative. So very dim CD45, it is homogeneously positive for 117. It has a partial CD13, partial HLA-DR, and a dim CD64 expression, and a dim CD4, partial CD4 expression. So the only marker that is kind of lineage associated that we see here is 117. So we have to remember that 117 is positive on myeloid blasts, but however, 117 is also positive on erythroblasts. So what we see here, nothing here is lineage specific. So we have to do our add-on tubes for the cases like this. So when we did our the add-on tubes, we found that cytoplasmic MPO, CD3, and rest of the B cell markers were negative. However, one add-on tube yielded results. So we are just showing you that tube here. So this is another tube that has CD71 and some other markers. Let's first see CD71 versus site scatter. We see that there is a large population that expresses really bright CD71. And these cells that express CD71 are actually the same cells that had the dimmer CD45 that we saw in the previous tube. And when we follow that up, they are positive for CD36, pretty bright. And again, we see that they are positive for CD117 and they express a partial CD235. 235 is also another name for glycophorin. So they express partial glycophorin. And like we saw in the previous tubes, they are also partially positive for HLA-DR. And here again, we see the bright CD36 expression. So here we see that there are expression of erythroid associated markers like CD71 and CD36. So CD71 and CD36, they are very bright in the erythroid population. However, both of them are not specific for erythroblasts. CD71, if you see, they can be positive on lymphoblasts, mature lymphocytes, a variety of cells. And CD36, if you see, they can be positive on monoblasts, megakaryocytes. So none of these are specific. It's just the constellation of expression of various markers that is going to help us here. And CD71, the intensity with which erythroblasts express this marker, you don't see that with any other cells. So that helps. So you see a really bright CD71 expression on erythroblasts. And CD235 or glycophorin and hemoglobin A, these are the specific markers for erythroid lineage. If you're using a tissue specimen, E-cadherin and spectrin can help. Those are specific markers for erythroid lineage. So here we see that 235 is partially positive. So 235 is, like I said, a specific marker, but it kind of is acquired by the erythroids a little later in their maturation phase. So there can be cases where 235 can be dim or very weakly positive. And 117 is usually positive on erythroblasts. If you see, even in your tissue specimens, when you do 117 IHC for blast evaluation, if you happen to do, you'll see that erythroblasts pick up those markers. And CD71, 36, 235, 117, all the erythroid markers are positive here. HLA-DR and CD34 are often negative in erythroid leukemias or erythroblasts. However, here we have a partial HLA-DR expression, which is helpful. CD13, CD33, CD56, all these can be aberrantly expressed by erythroblasts. So here we have a partial expression of CD13 in this case. And CD45. CD45 can be negative in many cases of erythroblasts. Actually, they are more often negative than positive. Here it is kind of weakly positive. The reason is erythroblasts, when they start maturing, initially they are positive for CD45, but they quickly lose CD45 when they mature. So that's why the expression of CD45 in this case, you can see that it is much dimmer than what we are used to seeing in blast population. So dim CD45, 117 positivity, and 117 need not be always positive. So keep that in mind. When everything is negative, we use add-on tubes for megakaryocytes and erythroblasts. So when you see that, add your erythroid specific markers like glycophorin A and hemoglobin A, and you can also add 71 and 36 to help you. So when you report this, your top line would be this percentage of immature erythroblasts identified. And this case turned out to be a pure erythroid leukemia, but you cannot make that diagnosis, just like many other cases, from just flow cytometry, because the criteria for pure erythroid leukemia is that 80% of nucleated cells have to be erythroblasts, and of which 30% has to be pro-erythroblasts. So you need the bone marrow aspirate differential count to make that diagnosis. So here you can just say these many erythroblasts are identified. So the purpose of flow cytometry in general is not to give you the number or to give you the exact diagnosis. When you see an abnormal population, a mature or immature abnormal population in any specimen, peripheral blood, bone marrow, tissue, or body fluids, the job of flow cytometry is to phenotype it and tell you, okay, this is what those abnormal cells are. It does not quantify for you. Almost always the numbers that we get usually matches with the numbers that we see in the specimens, but that's not what flow cytometry is is supposed to be used for. It's not reliable because there is extensive processing of the specimen before we obtain these plots. So there's a lot of variations that could be induced into the specimen. So do not rely on the numbers and do not expect flow cytometry to give you the exact diagnosis in many cases, especially in cases where numbers play a role in the diagnostic criteria. So it is helpful to get the phenotype, and it can give you an idea about information on the prognostic markers. It can help you with therapy because there are a lot of antibodies that can be used for treatment, and it can help you tell you which treatment would be effective based on the antibody expression, antigen expression. So that's what you're supposed to use flow cytometry for. So in this case, you'll say this percentage of immature erythroblasts identified, and you'll correlate with your bone marrow to see what the final diagnosis turns out to be. And if normally when the numbers don't satisfy the criteria for pure erythroid leukemia, it falls under the category of MDS with excess blasts. So that distinction has to be made by the bone marrow differential count. Thank you.